Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. Background. Let me give you some context on my buddy Jake, not his real name. Jake has been coding since he was a little kid, probably around 8 years old. By the time he got to college, he was breezing through most of his computer science courses because he'd already mastered a ton of that stuff years before. Jake is one hell of a programmer. Jake's career has been pretty damn successful. He's worked at big tech companies like Google, Facebook, Amazon, and most recently a major hedge fund. That's where this story kicks off. Jake's work involved a lot of AI tech, and at this hedge fund, he was the lead programmer overseeing a massive project to optimize their AI system for executing millions of trades every single day. His contributions had a huge freaking impact on the company, to put it mildly. All of this went down with the COVID-19 pandemic raging in the background. Like many workplaces, they shifted to a remote setup, with Jake continuing to work from home. During that time, Jake started feeling cramped in his fancy-schmancy $5,000 a month NYC apartment. He wanted more space, a yard, a heated pool, a nice 3-car garage, the whole shebang. It dawned on him that he could leave the city life behind. Jake moves to Colorado. So, Jake packed his bags and headed to his hometown in Colorado, where he bought himself a suite pad with a heated pool, a 3-car garage, a sprawling yard, and get this. The yard had a separate mother-in-law suite that he turned into his ultimate man cave. It was a 2-bedroom, 1-bath setup, basically a whole separate living space just for him. Freaking awesome, right? Oh, and the best part? His new mortgage payment was way less than his old NYC rent. Like, half the price, or even less. For the rest of the pandemic remote work period, Jake was cranking out code like a machine, never actually telling his employer that he'd relocated. Then, finally, COVID-19 started to wind down. COVID's over. Back to the office? Yeah, right. Jake's boss, Aaron, calls him up one day and says, "All right, Jake, Monday we're heading back to the office." Jake's like, "Yeah, about that. I moved to Colorado." Aaron's jaw drops and he's all, "You didn't ask if you could do that?" Jake smugly replies, "Didn't know I needed your permission to move." Aaron insists that Jake has to move back to NYC to keep his spot on the team, but Jake's not having it. He'd been crushing it while working remotely for over a year, and his quality of life was so much better outside the city. He proposed traveling to NYC a few times a year on his own dime for meetings, but Aaron shot that down, saying if Jake didn't want to live in NYC, he didn't have a place at the company. Now, let me ask you, what do you think a talented, experienced programmer specializing in AI would say to that kind of ultimatum? If you guessed that Jake quit, you'd be absolutely right. He told Aaron to take that job and shove it. Maintaining complex code is no joke. Any programmer worth their salt knows that sometimes the best person to maintain a code base is the one who originally wrote it. There's so much logic, thought process, and individualistic quirks that go into coding that it can be a nightmare for someone new to take over someone else's work. Enter John, the CEO. 6 weeks go by, and John, the hedge fund CEO, reaches out to Jake. John wants Jake to consider coming back, so he suggests flying Jake to NYC for a meeting. But Jake's not playing that game. He flips the script and tells John, "No, how about you fly out to Colorado and we'll discuss it here." Jake wanted to establish some ground rules. If he was going to return, it would be on his terms, working remotely from Colorado. And any talks about his employment would happen in his home turf. John agreed and flew out to meet Jake 2 days later. Jake lays it all out. The company really needs him back because the programming team is struggling without his expertise and guidance. John offers Jake the chance to return, but with a 20% pay cut since he wouldn't be living in the expensive NYC area. John calls it a cost of living adjustment. Jake's not having any of that BS. "No," he says, "I want a 15% raise above what I was earning." John leans back, obviously taken aback. "The reason we pay what we do is because we ask our employees to live in NYC. We understand it's an expensive city." Jake shuts that down real quick. "You pay what you pay because I'm worth it. If I wasn't worth what you were paying me, you wouldn't be paying me that much. My first condition is, if you want me back, it'll be with a 15% raise." John, probably sweating a little at this point, asks, "And the second condition?" Jake doesn't miss a beat. "The second condition is I'll come back so long as Aaron isn't there." John sighs heavily. "You're asking for too much." But Jake's not budging. "You don't need to bring me back if you don't want to. I'll be just fine elsewhere." He gives John an ultimatum. "My offer is good till Friday." John's all, "What do you mean?" Jake explains, "Next Monday is when I start looking for other work. This offer expires on Friday." It was Tuesday when they were having this conversation. John left, probably to go lick his wounds and discuss things with the other partners. The decision. Sure enough, that Thursday, Jake's phone rings. It's John on the other end. Tim, we're transferring Aaron to a different fund. He won't be working with you anymore, and we're fine with giving you a 15% raise. Can we send you an offer letter for you to sign? Jake, wanting to cover his bases, asks, Of course, and Aaron is really gone? I won't have to interact with him at all? John reassures him, Yes, you will never need to interact with Aaron ever again. That was back in early 2023. Jake never had to set foot in NYC again, never heard from Aaron, never saw his name on any company communications or anything. He's been working remotely from Colorado, making more money than before, with a better quality of life and without that insufferable Aaron breathing down his neck. The next one is an entitled people story. I've lived in my house for over 15 years and never had any issues with my neighbors. Everyone pretty much kept to themselves, but we're still friendly if we happen to see each other coming and going. That all changed when a new family moved in next door about 6 months ago. From the very first week, it was obvious they were going to be problematic. The wife's name was Karen, and she lived up to the stereotype. Loud, obnoxious, entitled, and always complaining about something. Her poor husband and kids always looked exhausted from dealing with her dramatics. At first it was small things like telling us our lawn was half an inch too long or that our car was parked too close to her driveway. Annoying, but harmless. Then she started calling the homeowner association to complain anytime someone had a birthday party or barbecue after 7 p.m. because of the noise. Our homeowner association has quiet hours that start at 10 p.m., so there was nothing wrong with having get-togethers earlier than that. Things escalated quickly from there. Karen began calling the police for every tiny infraction, real or imagined. She reported another neighbor for speeding when they were driving the 25 miles per hour speed limit down our street. She yelled at the mailman for loitering on her property when he was delivering her mail. She even called animal control on the sweet old lady across the street who walked her tiny lapdog without a leash sometimes. We all tried to be understanding at first. Maybe she was just having trouble adjusting from living in an apartment in the city to a suburban neighborhood. But her behavior only got worse. And when she started targeting me, I'd had enough. I decided I wasn't going to let her run me out of my own home that I worked so hard for. The final straw was Memorial Day weekend when I had about 15 family members over for a pool party. We were just enjoying the hot day, grilling burgers and hot dogs, playing some music, and swimming. A completely normal gathering. Around 7 p.m., Karen comes storming over, screaming that we're violating noise ordinances and demanding we end the party immediately. I calmly explained that we weren't breaking any rules and she needed to return to her own property. Well, she lost it. She started ranting and raving about suing us all for disturbing the peace or some nonsense. I finally had no choice but to ask her to leave and close the gate in her face. About 20 minutes later, just as we're getting the kids out of the pool and starting to clean up, 3 police cars roll up with lights flashing. I couldn't believe it. Karen had actually called the cops and told them we were having some rowdy drunken party with underage drinking. The police came in through my gate and started questioning everyone, asking for IDs from my teenage cousins and everything. It was completely humiliating. I told them exactly what had happened, but they claimed they had to check out the noise complaint. After inspecting all around my property and talking to my family, they finally agreed that it was just an average pool party and there was no issue. They left with an apology, but I was absolutely livid. This was apparently Karen's pattern of behavior, but she had never been this extreme before. I decided right then that I was going to sue her for harassment and trespassing. I knew without solid evidence it would be hard to build a case against her. So I installed security cameras on all corners of my property. If she set 1 foot on my lawn, it would be recorded. A few weeks went by without incident. Then on the 4th of July, my girlfriend and I were enjoying an evening swim after the neighborhood fireworks show had ended. Out of nowhere, Karen comes bursting through my gate screaming that I built a pool without proper permits and she was going to have me arrested. Thankfully, I have permits for my pool that was built years ago by the previous owner. But Karen didn't care about facts. She continued yelling that she was going to call the police to come inspect it. At this point, I completely lost my temper on her. I yelled, "You are trespassing! Get out now before I have you arrested!" That must have stunned her because she scurried off my property. I thought maybe she had finally gotten the message. I was wrong. The next day, I come home from work to find 2 police cars in my driveway. Karen had called them first thing in the morning, claiming I was illegally running a hotel out of my home. The cops came in and I showed them it was just me and my girlfriend living there. Karen apparently saw my girlfriend coming and going at odd hours since she works night shifts as a nurse and assumed she was some kind of prostitute bringing clients to my place. Absolutely crazy assumptions. The police were wonderful and completely understood that Karen was out of control with her bogus calls. They agreed to talk to their supervisor about charging her for misuse of cops' services. I eagerly showed them the security footage I now had of her trespassing on my property on multiple occasions. Armed with clear video evidence and accounts from the police themselves, I had more than enough for a solid lawsuit. I filed harassment, trespassing, and nuisance charges against Karen. In court, I presented the documentation of her excessive calls to cops with false accusations. The prosecutor said Karen was wasting police resources they could have used for real emergencies. When the judge saw the video footage of her unlawful entry onto my property, that sealed her fate. Karen was found guilty of harassment and trespassing. She got slapped with hefty fines and even probation prohibiting her from having any contact with me for 2 years. Justice was served. I used some of the money from her fines to install a tall fence and higher security gate around my entire property. Karen moved a few months after the trial, much to the delight of our whole neighborhood. The new neighbors are wonderful, and I can finally enjoy my pool in peace. The next one is an entitled parent's story. I, 32F, was in a major car accident in January of 2021. Ironically, I had been taking my boyfriend, 36M, to the ER because he had bleeding ulcers and ended up getting admitted to the hospital that night. This was still when they were enforcing COVID rules, so I was booted out of the hospital at about 0300 in the morning. When I left, it was snowing, and not thinking hopped on the freeway, which wasn't a good idea. I had been driving a lifted Jeep Cherokee with mud terrain tires, not the best ever for snowstorm driving. Getting off the freeway to go home, my brakes locked up and I went into a light pole head first at about 60 miles per hour. My Jeep did not have airbags. That was dumb. Needless to say, my car was totaled and I had to be extracted from the car by the fire department. This whole time I had been blacking out and losing consciousness, and I still get random flashes of I don't have all my memories from that night or several months after the accident. I got sent to the nearest trauma center, which was the same hospital I had just left. The nurses felt pretty bad about kicking me out. I ended up with a moderate to severe TBI, broken under my left eye, hairline fractures on my skull on the left side, bruising behind my ears, and black eyes. I had also cut open the inside of my mouth, had multiple lacerations all over my face. I broke my driver's side window with my face, broke and bruised some ribs, had hairline fractures in my spine, broke my right wrist, my right knee, and my left foot, which required 2 surgeries, and I still need approximately 3 more. Needless to say, I was not doing great. I had recently gotten divorced the previous year, and think that my entitled parents decided that my accident was my boyfriend's fault. I had to stay in the hospital for a total of 12 days, in which case the mild family drama exploded into a severe family inferno. As I got closer to being released, all I had wanted to do was go home to my boyfriend and our kids. He had 2 previously, and I had 1. My entitled mother decided that wasn't what she wanted. On the phone, we sound almost identical. The whole time that I was in the hospital, she had been getting on the phone and impersonating me to my apartment complex management, even going as far as calling the cops to get my boyfriend and his 2 kids removed from my apartment. They were not on my lease yet. My EM also forged my signature on hospital paperwork and made up a story about how my boyfriend was abusive to me and got him banned from seeing me at the hospital, again forging my signature and writing a letter stating I didn't want to see him. This whole time, I was still suffering from the effects of my TBI and was delirious from the combination of pain medications and brain fog from my head injury. EM even had the locks changed on my apartment without my consent. When I finally was released from the hospital, I was in a wheelchair because of my broken foot that had just had 2 plates and 10 screws surgically put in to hold it together, and an ankle-to-hip brace on my other leg from my knee being broken. I requested to go home to my apartment, but again, EM played it that I couldn't go home because I had a 2nd-story apartment and couldn't take care of myself. So I got sent to stay at my parents' house, against my will, an hour away from home because EM wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to let my boyfriend come back to my apartment. I spent almost a whole miserable month there. EM refused to take me home even after I got crutches and was able to bear some weight. Initially, they refused to even go get my crutches from town because they didn't want me to have more mobility. Eventually, it got to the point where I had a friend come and pick me up from EM's house so I could go home because they kept refusing to let me go. As I gained clarity in my mind and was taken off the intense pain medication, I was able to start rectifying the situations that EM made a huge mess of in my life, but I'm still trying to recover in some areas. I didn't find out until much later when medical bills started coming in that EM had called my boyfriend's health insurance company impersonating me and had me removed from his insurance. It took months of calling and badgering and footwork on my part to get the situation figured out and have the insurance pay for what they were supposed to pay for. It almost caused me to go bankrupt. At the same time, EM signed me up for minimal health insurance coverage through the state that I had no idea I was enrolled in until I got a bill later stating that I back owed fees. Needless to say, I eventually completely cut both EM and my father out of life after finding out how much they tried to control and how much they messed my life up. I ended up getting protection orders after they tried to break into my house, stalked me, and sent family and friends over to harass me. This whole incident was the straw that broke the camel's back. There was quite a bit of retaliation on their side that threw my life into a total tailspin ever since, but I'm sticking to my guns and not backing down. Update. Wow! I'm a little overwhelmed with how fast this post exploded yesterday. I was definitely not expecting that. I tried to keep up with as many comments and replies as possible, but I figured this might be an easier way to answer the questions that have been thrown at me. But first off, I definitely understand those who are skeptical about my post. It's more than a little bizarre, and I'm probably not the best at describing some of the situations, but I seriously appreciate all the great advice that has been given. And I'm looking at some of the other options listed in the comments as well as what I am already doing. I think the easiest part for me to clear up is the questions about the insurance and my EM getting me off of the insurance I had with my boyfriend and putting me on the state insurance without my or my boyfriend's consent. As an adult, I can call in and cancel my coverage at any time, with or without the policyholder's knowledge. There doesn't need to be a major life change in order to be taken off of a policy, usually just to get new insurance coverage or add someone to insurance. All my EM needed was the insurance information and access to my information as well as his, which she did. She already had all of my personal information, including my SS number and my insurance information. This is how she signed me up for insurance coverage through the state as well. As some of you speculated, I'm sure it had something to do with the financial control she could exert over me as well as trying to totally get my boyfriend out of my life. But honestly, I will probably never get the real answers to that. The reason why I didn't get the hospital bills immediately is a pretty easy explanation. First off, my car insurance coverage included medical bill payments as well, up to a certain amount of money. At first, going through the billing process, the hospital, orthopedics, anesthesiologists, ECT had to send their bills through my car insurance first and then through my health insurance. I'm not 100% sure how that all works exactly, but I do know it was a mess and it took multiple tries to explain to all the doctors what was already paid out, who got what money, and the next insurance to the bill. As well as it took weeks for them and myself to realize that while I was in the hospital, the insurance I went in with got canceled mid-hospital stay. So bills got sent out to the insurance I had to my boyfriend, which was followed by confusion from the hospital, insurance companies, and myself trying to figure out when it got cut off, what was covered, and what exactly happened. This takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. My EM did tell me eventually what she had done with my insurance and how she changed it, but by that point, it was too late and I was scrambling to try and rectify the situation and get as much covered from my hospital stay as possible. Even doing that, I still owe nearly $50,000 in medical bills. For those who had questions about how I had gotten on his insurance in the first place when he started the job, he had the insurance from which we had qualified as domestic partners because of how long we had been living together and how long the relationship had lasted. For everyone wondering if we went to the cops or are filing charges or anything along those lines, it's a very long story, but yes, we are. I have a very good lawyer who actually represents myself and my boyfriend. It took me a while after I got home to my apartment to get to the point where I cut contact with EM. When I finally got home, I tried to start seeing my boyfriend again, and we started the long process of trying to heal from what happened since EM had essentially kicked him and his 2 kids out of my apartment. In the middle of winter, they really had nowhere else to go. The kids ended up staying with friends for a while, and he stayed in his car and rented a hotel room when possible. I wasn't fully aware of what exactly was going on at the time, as EM had my cell phone and access to my phone, and while I was at her home, she watched like a hawk to make sure that I wasn't contacting him. If I did, I got berated, screamed at, and at one point did not have access to my phone, which was all very confusing because I was on very heavy-duty pain medication, as well as having the confusion from the TBI. After I had made it back to my apartment and started to have more contact with my boyfriend, my EM escalated. staying at my apartment even though I told her I was fine, showing up randomly, and eventually getting so angry that I refused to cut contact with my boyfriend that she threatened to kill him. That was when I grew a slight backbone and decided that it just wasn't going to get better. At that point, I filed for a protection as well as my boyfriend who copied my paperwork. When the first protection orders got dropped because we didn't have enough evidence, she had gotten a lawyer at this point, but we did not because we couldn't pay for a retainer. And this was before I had gotten smart enough to install cameras and a call recorder on my phone. My EM went to the city's prosecutor's office and told them that she wanted to press charges of perjury against my boyfriend. This is where the friendship with the prosecutor started, and it was very hard for us to get anything to stick because EM was getting in with our local PD and the prosecutor. Yes, they ended up going after my boyfriend and not me. Yes, that is selective prosecution. Yes, it is very illegal. At this same time, my mother and father are retired and apparently have nothing better to do with themselves. They had been in contact with my boyfriend's ex-wife, and at the same time we were getting beaten down with the perjury case. They also helped my boyfriend's ex-wife start a custody battle for his children. They had been separated for some time, but the divorce had been stalled in court for several years at this point. They also filed in small claims court for lawyer and court fees after our first protection order was removed. My ex-husband had been allowing my daughter to see both of my parents still, which I did fight, and which has probably spurred the grandparents' rights visitation case that they filed during this same time. So we have been fighting one thing at a time, and collecting all of the evidence that we can. All of the hospital paperwork, especially those that were forged, had to be requested from the hospital. The phone calls to the insurance company needed to be requested, and we needed our lawyer to get those. It wasn't something they were just going to give us, unfortunately. At this point, we have waded through almost all of the court filings my EM had thrown at us, and we are finishing gathering out evidence so we can counterattack at this point. At the time, our lawyer was telling us to be patient and gather as much as we could, as when we get through the thick of it, we can throw what we have into the system, but we needed and want to have enough to nail them to the wall. From here, there will be counter lawsuits both jointly between myself and my boyfriend and separate lawsuits, as well as submitting what we have for the identity theft. It's a very long process, and it takes a lot of time, effort, and money to get things moving. For those of you wondering if me and my boyfriend got back together and how that is going, yes, we did get back together. It didn't take long for me to start realizing what was happening when I wasn't being given the heavy narcotics and my brain started the healing process from the TBI. It did take time for me to wade through everything that happened and try and recall memories. We did get back together, found a new place, and moved back in together with his 2 kids and my daughter. We have had some hard times, and of course we are both a little damaged from the whole process, but we both have counseling or doing well. I hope this helps explain and expand on the questions everyone has been asking in the comments. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already.